Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Stratosphere Studio. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, with a rainy day hair day today, but doggone it, we're going on anyway. Eff it. We'll do it live. I hope everybody's doing well. Um, and there's some goodish news. Actually, could be greatish news. Um, Hi, gang. Hello, YouTube. Hello, the other thing. You know the thing. Twitch. So anyway, here's the thing. Yes, it's a great shirt. It's a great color. It's a great team. Used to be a great team. We'll be a great team again, by God. Okay, so here's the goodish greatest news. I had a monster deadline for three. Getting so many comments on the shirt. I think I'll just put the shirt up. I'll just tack the shirt to the wall, put the camera on that, and we will call it a day. So as you've been well aware, and me missing a couple of these Stratosphere Studio shows and all the rest of it. However, I had a monster deadline of three finished scripts that I had to have by Christmas. So I got two of them off on the 25th. Good to see everybody too. Got two of them off on at about 11:59 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Came in and wrote basically all day Christmas Day, and then and then what did I do then? Today's Tuesday. Yes, yes. So got in today at around six o'clock in the morning and just cranked out the polished pash on the third one. So I delivered that today. So that's those three delivered. But here's the good news. I've been doing well. First of all, I finally broke through this thing. I finally found the thread that I needed to, and got into the Russian Revolution, which is something I hadn't really done an awful lot before. I was going to write about the Terror Masters, and I knew them real well, but I had to read a bunch of books and digest all this stuff. So I got through the Russian Revolution. It's all downhill from here. But best news is, in my opinion, anyway, as far as I'm concerned, I actually got to the point where, for once, I was clever enough. See, after 40, 50 years, things start to slowly begin to sink in. Got to the point where, instead of me wondering why I didn't like writing so much, this time I got to the point where I was just running 12-hour sessions, and I just kept telling myself, "This is actually fun, man. You're having a good time. Don't forget this. You're having a good time. This is fun. Don't forget." If I can maintain that, then that's a game changer because we get a lot more done when it's writing. Um, Hello everybody. Hello Keith. Hi everybody out there. So I know I've talked about this before. Many of you are familiar with it. The problem with starting writing, since this is the entertainment show, the whole idea of writer's block. And you'll hear writers just go on and on about this, about the only thing they can automatically write. If they got a problem with writer's block, the one thing they can write is talking about writer's block. However, the problem is, and I know I've mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. The problem is that when you've got an idea you really like, as long as it's in your head, it's perfect. Once you commit it to paper, uh, then it takes form, and it just never seems quite as good. But that's actually not true. That's what I've been telling myself for the last 25 years. Hello, Australia. Hi, Stephen. The fact of the matter is, and this is the big revolution in my thinking, which is why I'm anxious to come into work tomorrow morning and start writing all day. I really genuinely am. That's wow. That's a big deal. This time I realized, no, I've been programming myself. Been programming myself. Hi, Matthew. First time I saw you live too. And over the course of 4 decades of writing, yeah, at least started writing screenplays when I was 16, I think. I've been telling myself, no, it's never as good as it is in your head, and that's why I'm reluctant to put it down. That's actually programming yourself. And then these last couple of days, I said to myself, actually, no, it's better than you had imagined it. You you wrote what you were planning to write, and then you got a bunch of other cool new ideas, and you wrote those too. So it's been a revolutionary experience for me writing about the revolution, and just as a again as a sort of a just quick general tease, the the series keep changing. The names of the series keep changing as I get through them, and the things that I originally thought were going to be the episodes have changed quite a bit. Uh, what is it? Yeah, hang on. Lutheran Carnivore says, "Hey, Bill, I go back to the PJTV days, but I never used this handle before." Anyway, hello, hello, Carnivore, or whatever your new incarnation is. Anyway, so here's the thing: the original, forget about the original. Right now, the three episodes that have been delivered. Episode one is called "Innocent People." It's basically just an overview of what where the bodies are today, and then what happened to the Romanovs. Second episode is called Bacillus, and that's about Lenin's trip to St. Petersburg and getting established there. And then the third one, I was going to call The Bloodbath Begins because I was just going to cover the revolution in 2,000 words or something like that, and then I get on to the interesting stuff. Well, 8,500 words later, I had just finished the revolution, so this one is going to be called the Ramshackle Revolution. And I've asked the producers if we can do an extra episode to make it 8, and they said that they think that's probably going to be all right. So that'd be cool. And so I just want to talk real briefly about, before we go to questions, I want to talk briefly about the Russian Revolution in terms of just, while it's just still fresh in my mind. I've been living there for the last couple months, but been, visiting for the last couple months, been living there for the last week or so. Secret Order of Knightly Valor, as the super chat says, the platonic ideal of a story doesn't really exist. Now you tell me, you could have saved me so much time and effort, and we could have had so much more written if you told me that before. I'm kidding, of course, but it was a fun discovery. So here's the story about the Russian Revolution. If it hadn't killed 20 million people, the actual truth about the Russian Revolution would be absolutely full on hilarious. And I mean really, really hilarious. It's unbelievable how hilarious that whole thing was. One of the things, I obviously got a lot of factual material to cover, and I've got, as always with these episodes, I've finally figured out the formula for this. I've been doing it, I think, for the last three series, and I'm doing it on this one. I like to start each episode with maybe 2 pages of a real small little story that really got almost nothing to do with anything. Really hard to figure out what it is. I don't want you to know what it is. The one I remember off the top of my head was on the Cold War, my favorite episode called Cloak and Daggers, about spying. I opened that one with the story of these two UDT guys, these two UDT divers for the U.S. Navy, swimming into this harbor in Vietnam, and how they swam through pitch black water, and then that whole thing. It was a cool little story, told to me in person by the guy who did it, and then we got into the rest of the stuff. So I've got good stories for the first 3 episodes, and I'm gonna find them for the rest of them. But let me just talk a little bit about this Russian Revolution. So a lot of this stuff in the second and third episodes comes from a biography of Lenin, and the guy's name is. It's a great book, it really is. It's really, I've credited him as many times as I could, but honestly, I've just it's just all laid out for me there. Victor Sebastian, I think, just called Lenin. It's a terrific book. I highly recommend it. And one of the things he mentioned was, in passing, when he was talking about the Russian Revolution, he said that when they made the film about it, Sergei Eisenstein made a film called October about the communist revolution. And in this book, Victor says that Eisenstein used a lot more extras to make the movie than were actually involved in the actual revolution in Petrograd. And I thought, that's odd. And then I realized, I don't want to steal that line. I've already taken a lot of. I haven't taken any of his words. That's just plagiarism. But a lot of his quotes, I don't have access to primary sources, so you get the idea. I want to do something different. So yeah, White Feather Carlos Hathcock, exactly. Little story within a story. So so here's what I did. After the opening story, I just jumped the tracks, keep things moving, don't let anybody know where the story's going until it's over, that kind of thing. So I kind of jumped off the rails and I started talking about Sergei Eisenstein. So he was the the father of not only of Russian, I almost said cinema, beat me about the head if anybody hears me say cinema. If you see me in person, then make me pay for it. But he was the first and really greatest of the Russian movie makers. And Eisenstein, pretty much on his own, invented the modern movie. And he did this not through groovy camera work or any special effects or anything. He did it because he invented editing. Editing as we understand it. Prior to Eisenstein, editing was just tacking scenes together, right? D.W. Griffith in Birth of a Nation was starting to get a lot of the pieces together in terms of like close-ups and wide shots and that kind of thing. Originally, audiences were told by the studios, the artists making the very first films were told you have to show everybody from the bottom of their souls to the top of their heads all the time. Otherwise, the audience will be angry that you didn't give them their full money's worth. That's honestly what they were saying. So D.W. Griffith comes along, not a good guy, brilliant filmmaker. He makes Birth of a Nation, which is basically pro-KKK propaganda. And that's not good, but I'm not one of those people to take away somebody's life work and pretend it didn't happen just because they turned out to be crummy people. So he invented the basic toolbox, right? All of these things I just mentioned, tracking shots, reversals, close-ups, cutaways, emotional reaction shots, reaction shots of bullets hitting, all of it. He basically came up with all of it. But Eisenstein was the guy who actually put it together. Matthew D. Rice says, what's wrong with cinema? And the answer is that's what Europeans call movies. And also intellectuals call them movies. And that's a mortal insult to me. So I started telling the story of Sergei Eisenstein as I heard it in film school back when I was at the University of Florida 100 years ago. And what he told me was that, first of all, Eisenstein had discovered the power of the edit, the power of it, not how to cut it, but the power of it. And the classic example is that Eisenstein would take footage of a man with a completely impassive expression on his face, and he would hold that shot, then he'd cut it to food, and then he'd come back to it, then he'd cut to more food like a feast, come back to it. And when people saw that, they asked him, what's the man thinking of? And they said, well, he looks hungry. Then they did the same thing with like a beautiful woman. They said, oh, he looks lustful. Then they did the same thing with scenes of destruction. He said, oh, he looks sad. It was the same footage. It hadn't changed. What came before the cut and after the cut, the piece of film, the cut before and the cut after influenced what was going on now. And it's incredible the power that had. So why was Eisenstein doing nothing but cutting up film and stuff when he could have been out there making movies like a young Steven Spielberg? He was 27, I think, when he made his first big film. Well, the reason is because Eisenstein started working for the kind of Ministry of Cinema or whatever it was in the Soviet Union. Started working with them in 1923, so 5 years after the revolution. And since it was a state-run enterprise, like everything else in the Soviet Union, the Bolsheviks didn't have the money to buy film stock or lab processing fees. Sorry, just want to take care of these. It's not a super chat. First time chat from RF Realville, if I get that wrong. RFD Realville, excuse me. Does BW monitor this chat? No, I'm sorry. I'm afraid he doesn't. So they had no money. And Eisenstein, 20 years old, 20-something years old, and he is, thank you, Eric, he is burning, right? He's burning to make movies. But there are no movies. They can't afford film stock, right? This is what socialism will do for you. So the government couldn't afford to buy movie stock. So Eisenstein spent his first 5 years doing the only thing he could afford to do, and that was taking Western movies that they already had and re-editing them completely, and not just cutting the story as it existed. He would take parts of Western movies, put them together in ways that they had no relationship to before, and he figured out he could tell a story using existing footage that was a brand new story. It is just really brilliant. And so here I am in the third episode, and I'm just, why the hell is Bill talking about Sergei Eisenstein so much? I talked about his first film, which is his most famous film, and the one he's most remembered for, I guess, which was Battleship Potemkin, which is, I want to say, made in 1925, and it's the story of the battleship Potemkin, strangely enough. And Potemkin was a battleship that had mutinied during the uprising of 1905, the failed uprising that didn't turn into a revolution. But a lot of it was setting the stage for what happened 12 years later. So he makes this film called Battleship Potemkin. And it looks like the first modern movie because it is. It's not an easy film to watch. I tried to watch it again. I watched so many films in film studies class. I learned so much in that class. So it's a little hard to get through. But what's not hard to get through is a sequence, the most famous sequence in the movie, and one of the most famous sequences ever. It's called the massacre on the Odessa steppes, and it recounts the story of how the Tsar's troops shot down a bunch of civilians. She shot them down in cold blood on the steppes of Odessa. And this thing is fully modern. It's wide shots, close-ups, tracking shots, cutaways, the pace, gunshots, people screaming, people reacting. It's modern movie making, and it's very, very powerful. The key moment is when a woman on the staircase gets shot or knocked down, and her baby carriage goes bumping down these enormous, huge, huge, long flight of steps. And, it's like, my God, yeah, that's it. It ginned up a lot of hatred towards the Tsar's troops. And I thought, wow, okay, that's cool. Because I was going to do Potemkin to lead into his next film. And while I was researching Potemkin, I found out that there was no massacre on the Odessa steppes. Never happened. It wasn't even close. He invented it out of whole cloth. And what he did was, he did what Natasha and I saw James Cameron do a couple nights ago with Avatar 2. He created a story that was guaranteed to get you to hate the kind of person, the people he wanted you to hate, by making them threaten or kill either babies in the case of the baby Pram on Potemkin, or in the case of Avatar 2, the whales that did philosophy and also conducted symphonies in their heads and could do math and all the rest of it. So with the baby, by the way. So it's actually kind of a cheap shot. And when I found out that didn't exist, I found like a real angle for the rest of the episode. And the angle is that, like the Odessa step sequence, one of the most famous sequences in history, as I've said, look it up on YouTube, it's really good. That was made up. It was fictional, cut out of whole cloth. Sergei Eisenstein invented it. He was a communist. He was a true believer. And then the comment from the Lenin biographer came back to my head and said he employed more extras making the movie than were actually involved in the actual revolution. And that's when I finally had the angle on the story, because Eisenstein's second movie was called simply October. And it's the story, you've all heard the story, of the storming of the Winter Palace, where the entire population of Petrograd just rises up, and there are soldiers and shooting guys climbing over fences and then falling down, and women getting shot, and there's bayoneting guys. They're working their way in to get to where Kerensky and his cabinet is. And I'd seen that movie, and that was the story of the Russian Revolution. It didn't happen. It did not happen at all. It's invented out of whole cloth. I can tell you what did happen. What did happen was hilarious, except for the fact that I think 6 people were killed that night out of a city of 2 million. Here's what actually happened. all of the plotting and Lenin and the timing and Kerensky govern all of that. I cover all of that. But in terms of the actual events, so on the 25th of October at about 3 p.m., Lenin has said that the revolution has to happen by that date because on the 25th there was going to be a council of Soviets held in Petrograd, and thank you, Veronica, and he wanted to say, he said to his fellow Bolsheviks, look, there's going to be this giant meeting of socialists and communists, what would become communists, giant meeting of the Soviets. We need to have the revolution now. The time is ripe now. If we don't do it now, somebody else is going to do it. We will never live to see this opportunity again. So he managed to convince the rest of the Bolsheviks to make it a coup. A lot of them wanted to do it legally and through the voting and constituent assembly, but Lenin said, no, we got to do it now. So on the afternoon of the 25th, Lenin goes into this meeting, this giant council of Soviets, which is being held at the Smolny Institute in Petrograd at Bolshevik headquarters. And he walks into this room and he says, the revolution has occurred and it's over and we won. Then he opens up a prepared statement and reads it aloud. Citizens of Russia, the provisional government has fallen. We have assumed power. We're going to guarantee land turned away from the aristocracy. Workers will own the means of production, blah, 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 blah. Long live the peasants and workers and soldiers revolution. And then he goes back upstairs to Bolshevik headquarters. And the line I had was, he said, he finished telling this enormous crowd of people that the revolution was over, won, and then he went upstairs and ordered it to begin. That's exactly what happened. So, I don't have the times exactly right, but you get the idea. So Lenin goes upstairs, it's probably 3:30 now, and he gives the order to open fire, which will be the beginning of the great, glorious Red October Revolution. The Romanovs were in Tsarskoye Selo, I want to say. I think they were in Tsar Village. They certainly were not in... there's a area about 20 miles south of Petrograd called Tsar Village, Tsarskoye Selo, I think. And that's where they had a bunch of palaces, too. That's where Kerensky had kept them. So, every word of this is true. So around 3:30, 4 o'clock, Lenin gives the order to get this thing going. The order is sent to the Peter and Paul Fortress. Now, Kronstadt Naval Base is out in the Gulf. It guards the harbor guards the approaches to St. Petersburg. But the Peter and Paul Fortress is right up, just slightly to the side. It's about 0.4 of a mile away from the Winter Palace. Winter Palace is this enormous building. That's where the provisional government and Kerensky and everybody else is hanging out. So Lenin sends the signal to the Peter and Paul Palace, which had been taken over about a week before by Kronstadt sailors who declared for the Bolsheviks. And so the word is given, and the signal will be to open fire, but the fire doesn't open. Half an hour passes, then an hour, nothing. Then 2 hours, nothing. Turns out that this beautifully constructed clockwork piece of brilliant revolutionary genius on the part of Lenin, turned out that when it came time to fire, the guys over at the Peter and Paul Fortress realized that the guns hadn't been cleaned or used in 2 or 3 years. And there was so much accumulated grime from the gunpowder and also all this detritus that just fell into it. They couldn't load the guns because the barrels were just so badly fouled. So they go looking around, and okay, well, we rolled out a couple of small field pieces, roll those babies into shape, set them up, and we're ready to go. We're going to be smaller, but we'll throw some shells into the Winter Palace. They're all set to do that. And then they find out that nobody knows where the 3-inch shells are, where the shells for the small guns are. Nobody knows where they are. So that idea goes down the window. Then they decide, okay, well, what we'll do is, while we're working on some kind of solution here, we will at least make the official signal. Now, the official signal had been worked out weeks in advance, and the signal that the revolution had begun was that a red lantern would be attached to the lanyard, and it would be run up the flagpole at the top of the Peter and Paul Fortress. And so the Bolsheviks are ready to make this happen and send up the thing. And as it turns out, somebody forgot to bring a lantern. There was no red lantern. They searched everywhere. Now it's getting to be 5 o'clock. Lenin is apoplectic, and they can't find a red lantern. There's not one to be had, and no one brought one. So the commander of the base, responsible for the lantern and the magnificent condition of the guns, he decides he's going to go into St. Petersburg and get a red lantern so we can get this revolution going. He hops over the wall, takes a couple steps, falls into the mud, nearly drowns in this bog, drags himself out, covered in weed and mud, makes it across the bridge to St. Petersburg proper, spends, I don't know, an hour looking to find a red lantern, which he couldn't do. But he does come back maybe 2 hours after he was supposed to open fire with a purple lantern. So, okay, so they take the purple lantern to the flagpole, and as I wrote, fortunately for Lenin, the Bolsheviks in history, they found there was no way to attach the lantern to the lanyard and run it up the pole. There was nothing they could attach it to. Otherwise, we'd be reading about the glorious Purple October Revolution. All right, so that's got to be it, right? No, we're just getting started. So, in a panic now, Lenin calls the Baltic Fleet commander and says, "Look, we got to get this thing going, and you got to help us." So the commander of the Russian Baltic Fleet, who'd gone over to the Bolsheviks, sends a cruiser, the Aurora, sends a cruiser over. It's going to be there in 15 minutes, and it's just chugging up the river, and it's going to take station opposite the Winter Palace. It's going to be a tenth or 2/10 of a mile away, and that'll show these capitalist, bourgeois in the Winter Palace that we mean business now. So the Aurora appears on station somewhere around 6:37, and the provisional government is in the Winter Palace, and they look out, and there's this gigantic cruiser, and the 8-inch guns on this thing's like looking down the Lincoln Tunnel, and they decide that since they couldn't do anything, they might as well not do anything. So they sit down to dinner and start eating their borscht. All that was left to defend the Kerensky government at the Winter Palace was some 200 Cossacks, two units of Cossacks, 200 cadets from a military academy, plus 40 members of the Petrograd Garrison Bicycle Squad, and, last but certainly not least, a unit from the, I got to get the name right. I'm sorry. I just have to get this right, because if I blotch this, I'll never forgive myself. Hang on a second. I got to get this exactly right. It's here somewhere, by golly. Hang on. Everybody just be cool. It's worth the wait. Really. It really is. I got to get this exactly right. So a unit, an all-woman unit called, yep. Working. Come on. I'm sorry for the delay. I hate dead air, but honestly. Oh man, this just drives me crazy when I do this. There it is. I had to get it absolutely right. So, in addition to the 40 members of the Petrograd Garrison Bicycle Unit, there are also 200 women, and they've formed a unit calling themselves the Shock Battalion of Death. So that's what's guarding the Winter Palace, the seat of the provisional government. 9 million soldiers under arms, and all the Kerensky government could manage at this point were the bicycle guys, 2 units of Cossacks, 200 cadets, and the 200 women in the Shock Battalion of Death. So they get there. Aurora gets there around 6. They send somebody off of the ship, goes over to the Winter Palace with an ultimatum, and he finds the Kerensky government in there. Turns out the Winter Palace isn't it's not being defended. John Reed, the American communist, walked in there in the afternoon and just people took his coat. They offered to give him a tour. Just a slow day at the palace. Everybody knew it was coming. Nobody knew it was on. And so they send over this ultimatum that says that if you do not surrender by 10 after 7, then we will open fire without any further warning. Well, the provisional government declines with thanks, and then they sit down to their borscht. And then nothing happens for 2 hours. Then, finally, Aurora fires one round, a blank, intentionally a blank. And this one round scares the provisional government to the point where everybody hits the floor, and several members of the shock battalion of death fainted dead away. A number of them got the vapors. They had to be carried into a back room. That's what the firing of the one blank did. By now, Lenin is just completely beside himself. He doesn't know what to do. The guys on Peter and Paul Fortress, however, have finally figured out that maybe what we should do is to swab the guns and get those barrels clean, so they do that. And then they fire off a couple of volleys. They get off 36 rounds. 36 rounds. Now, see if I can do this in reverse. The Peter and Paul Fortress, I'll just do it. So Peter and Paul Fortress is here, and the Winter Palace is like here, right? They're offset from each other, but they're only about, 0.2 of a mile away, but they're offset a little bit. So I did the calculations, and from the closest point of the Peter and Paul Palace to the closest point, Peter and Paul Fortress to the closest point of the Winter Palace, turned out to be 0.4 of a mile. That's not extreme range, right? 0.4 of a mile. So somewhere around 9 or 10, the gunners at the Peter and Paul Fortress, thank you, Woods, Precious Arms. I'll get to that in a minute. They finally get off 34 volleys. Now here's the part that really you just have to picture this, and we're going to do a lot of this with visuals. So I got to make this clear. The Winter Palace is about 0.3 of a mile long. It's pretty impressive. The Peter Paul Fortress is 0.4 of a mile away. So it is basically almost as wide as it is far away. The Bolshevik gunners in the fortress get off 36 rounds. 2 strike the building and chip a couple of decorative cornices on the outside of the Winter Palace. One of the rounds, fired at a 0.3 of a mile target from 0.4 of a mile away, one of those rounds misses by 300 yards. Okay, so now it's pretty much over. Now we mean business. So somewhere around 1:30 in the morning, Lenin decides to send his crack troops to storm the palace. This is the thing that Eisenstein had gotten all those thousands and thousands of extras for. So Lenin sends one of his lieutenants, whose name is right here. You really need to look him up. Actually, I'm not going to waste any more time. So he sends over his top man. And his top man turned out to be a guy named Vladimir Antonov Ovsinko, who was really a pretty short guy and looked kind of like a bird. His nom de guerre, his war name was Bayonet. That's what he was known to as the other Bolsheviks. So, top man goes over. The storming of the Winter Palace is led by this guy and maybe 15 or 20 Red Guards. That's it. And they don't storm the palace. Nobody fires a shot. The only people that were killed that night were killed by stray gunfire. He walks into the Winter Palace, walks up to the mica room, I think what it's called, where the provisional government is, and he walks in and he says, "All right, I am an official representative of the Revolutionary Military Council. You're all under arrest." And when he walks in, he's wearing glasses. He's a little guy. He's got a real broad-billed hat on it, and he's wearing this perfectly divine floppy red satin tie. So that's the guy who stormed the Winter Palace. They then, thank you, Marisha's got it. I'll just put it up there. I'll grab it since I don't have to find it. Hang on a second. Yeah, this is the guy. This is the top man that that Lenin sends over win the revolution. Yeah, that's the guy. Come on, you swine. I give up on this thing. You get the idea, right? Okay. How do I make this thing go away? Like that? Yes. That's their top guy. So he goes over there. He's wearing a floppy hat. He's got this and a floppy red tie, and he goes over there and demands their surrender, which he gets. Everybody in the government now is being led out of the Winter Palace and over to the Peter and Paul Fortress, and they got everybody except for the one person they came for, which was Kerensky, the leader of the government, Alexander Kerensky. Kerensky manages to make his escape, and the excuse given by Vladimir Antonov of Ovsienko was that it's not my fault. The 15 or 20 men that we took over found the way to the Tsar's wine cellar, which was one of the largest and best stocked in the world, and they're all roaring drunk. So, not wanting to go back and face Lenin with the news that Kerensky's gotten away, Bayonet here. One more time for good measure. Yeah, Bayonet decides, all right, here's what we'll do. He calls the Petrograd Fire Department and has them come over to the Winter Palace. His idea is they take their fire hoses and flood the wine cellar, right? So nobody can get down there. And I thought about this. What a stupid... Wait a minute, actually, hold on. That's actually a damn good idea. That's a really brilliant idea. Flood it with water. Nobody will be able to go down there. The bottles aren't damaged. They don't float away. They're heavier than the wood. That's a really damn good idea. So the Petrograd Fire Department arrives, and they're ready to take their hoses down there. And when he tells them what he wants them to do, pretty much as one, they drop their hoses, go down into the cellar, and get as drunk as the rest of the soldiers. Kerensky gets away. He goes to the front where he's always been good at inspiring the troops. And he, back in June, had launched the Kerensky offensive. He'd sent 4 army groups out against the Germans. That's a lot of guys, 4 army groups. Now, the day after the revolution, he's able to scrape up 200 sullen Cossacks. And he goes riding back to Petrograd to launch his counter-revolution, get the country back. And he damn near succeeded. Lenin was petrified. Lenin called a 5-alarm fire, asked the Baltic Fleet to send more battleships. They sent a battleship and 2 destroyers. And in the end, the Bolsheviks won by doing the one thing that they knew how to do well, which is subterfuge and deception and lying and that kind of thing. Somebody gets in contact with the Cossacks. They present the entire unit with a bribe, tell them they go home, and here's a big hunk of money. That's what they do. They didn't even know why they were there, let alone what they were doing. So that was the end of the Kerensky attempt. The country then goes into civil war, which I haven't gotten to yet. But Kerensky, I have a great deal of sympathy for Kerensky. I think on the Stratosphere Lounge, I read the list of what his government planned to do, and it's awfully close to the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution. I mean, really, the guarantees that the provisional government had in place the day after the Tsar fell were breathtaking. And Russia had a chance. They had a chance, the little window there, where they could have actually genuinely entered the family of nations as a European liberal parliamentary democracy. And it just didn't happen. It just didn't. Kerensky goes a little nuts during the revolution. Just prior to it, he starts sleeping in the Winter Palace in the Tsar's bed, and then he gets himself photographed behind the Tsar's desk, and he's just basically demanding that the flag gets raised and lowered when he comes in and leaves, just like it did with the Tsar. So Kerensky's starting to lose his mind anyway. So as far as the revolution goes, Kerensky's a pretty sad story, but I had a lot of sympathy for him in the previous episode, a lot. The more I learned about him, the better I liked him. He was very theatrical. He was extremely energetic, and he was a tremendous speaker because he was such a good actor. The Tsar's secret police, called the Okhrana, had a code name for him. They called him Speedy. And he damn near pulled it off. He damn near pulled it off. Just think about that. I think I mentioned this on the Stratosphere Lounge. If he'd succeeded, then there would have been no Soviet Russia. There would have been no Vietnam War, no Korean War, no Cuban Revolution, no China, no Red China, thanks to Eric, I think that was. It's heartbreaking. but his heart was in the right place. So here's the thing about Kerensky. He manages to escape the Bolsheviks. His Cossacks are bought out from underneath his feet, so he's got nothing. He basically heads for the sidelines and sits out the Civil War. Not involved, he's just there in case somebody needs the leader of a government. Time passes and he realizes that the Reds are going to win this thing. He's not going to lose. The Whites are going to lose. So he moves to Paris. In 1939, he visits the United States where he meets an Australian woman. They get married, go back to Paris, and then when Hitler invades France in 1940, Kerensky and his wife move permanently to the United States. He stays with her and tends to her while she was experiencing her fatal illness. She dies in 1946, and then Kerensky finds himself in the Upper East Side of New York City, where he is going to all kinds of cafes. He's not on speaking engagement. He's just hanging out, having a coffee, right? He's just a guy, and everybody loved him. He was back to what he always was. He was friendly. He was entertaining. He was speedy again. After several years, he's invited to come out to California, where he works with the Hoover Institute at Stanford University, and adds an awful lot of personal recollections to their history of this whole thing. And here's the part I really like. I have a line I like a lot. Sometimes I write stuff I really like. The line was, "History was kind to Kerensky, to Alexander Kerensky. He deserved it." Everybody that he opposed had gone into the dustbin of history, as Trotsky had said. Trotsky went into the dustbin of history, so did Lenin, so did Stalin, so did all of them. So did the idea, so did the whole idea, just went into the dustbin of history. And I wrote, now, of course, when you've got 20 million people killed, that's going to take more than a dustbin. Those people disappeared into the mass graves of history, or the execution cells of history, or the gulags of history. But Kerensky lived to see the moon landing, and died in 1970 of arteriosclerosis. I looked up the number one song at the time that would have been playing on the radio in the hospital in New York. And the number one song at the time was "The Long and Winding Road" by the Beatles. That's what he was listening to when he left. Everybody he fought against died screaming in terror in a basement, getting shot in the back of the head. Kerensky lives long enough to watch men walk on the moon, and then he's listening to the Beatles, and he just passes away at age 89. That's a good episode, I think. Really happy with that. So I'm all jazzed now. Now I want to come in and get the rest of these things done, which would be nice, and I'm sure Daily Wire wouldn't mind that at all either. So it's this thing is just, it's hard to believe it's real. It was so close. He was so close, and then it all falls apart, and then on some small level, like, history gives him a consolation prize. Pretty small one, but I was glad it was there. This is just heartbreaking to think about what could have been avoided and how much could have been avoided if he had just been less indestructibly naive. Up until the moment of the revolution, he was sure that the coup attempt would come from the right, that the army was going to launch a monarchist coup attempt, bring down the provisional government, restore the Tsar. He simply couldn't see it. He absolutely consistently and continually underestimated Lenin and the Bolsheviks until they were knocking on his door. He just couldn't see it. But that's what happened. So that's the thing about my theory of telling history, right? You have to find the personal stuff, and you have to find the stuff that's interesting. You can hang all kinds of ornaments on that tree, but you got to have a tree. You got to be something there that's not just in May, on 16th of May, the following week, Lenin. Nobody cares, really. Nobody's going to listen to that. But when you hear the stories of these kind of things, and when I'm done, when the guys who are doing the set and the producers at Daily Wire, when all of us together are finished with this, anybody who sees this show will never ever think about the communists the same way again. They're going to despise them more and they're going to laugh at them more. That revolution was it was a farce. I mean, and I'm making any of that up. It's just one thing after another, right? The shock battalion of death, and they all just faint dead away, and they send this guy in a red tie, and it's a clown show. It's a clown show that killed 20 million people, and that's not funny. But my God, parts of it were. I was practically crying when I heard about this commander goes over the edge. We need who got the lantern? Vasily, you were supposed to get the lantern. Well, I thought it was supposed to be Ivan was supposed to get the lantern. Well, for God's sake, nobody got a lantern. The guy goes over the goes over the wall, falls into a swamp, and drags himself out, crosses the bridge, gets into St. Petersburg. Petrograd. He's just caked in mud. He's like, excuse me, do you sell any red lanterns? By the way, here's the last thing about this. This thing is true. It really was that kind of a goat rodeo. And out of a city of 2 million people, 6 were killed. The best estimate of the total number of people involved was 10,000 people total for the night, which sounds like a lot of people, but in a city of 2 million, that's half of 1% of the population. The night that the revolution was happening, people were in restaurants, they were in nightclubs, they were going to the theater. The theaters were packed, and this coming revolution was just, everybody knew it was coming, just nobody knew when. So somewhere around 9 o'clock on the night of the 25th, the mayor of Moscow sends two messengers out, one to the Winter Palace to talk to Kerensky, and the other one to the Smolny Institute to talk to Lenin. And at 9 o'clock, the mayor sends these 2 messengers out and says, can either of you tell us if the insurrection has started yet? And if not, when should we expect it? It is in every way, the inverse of the American Revolution. Nothing but theorists and intellectuals completely incompetently botching something that ended up producing nothing but mass murder. And the American Revolution was the most famous people in the country openly debating whether or not we should do this, and if we do, what will come of it. And they did that for years until they got it right. And, what do you say about that? This one country kills 20 million of its own people, and the other one shoots 4 students in Kent State in 1970 and never gets over it. And rightfully so, right? The two are not comparable. They're not on the same planet. They're not on the same moral plane. And I'm sick and tired of people making the equations. It's just a lie. So that's that. Fortunately for me, the next episode, I've got a real foot in the stirrup already. Lenin gave a number of speeches prior to the revolution, and basically what he said was, look, people say, well, let's say you have your insurrection. Let's say we don't do it legally. We don't wait for this constituent assembly. Let's just say that we go with your plan. How the hell are we going to run this government? Yeah, exactly right. CCG in YouTube says 4 dead in Ohio. Yeah, I remember that song. 4 dead in Ohio. It was a shame. When I say it was a shame, I mean it was a shame. It was a national shame. 4 dead by accident, right? Pretty much by accident. In the aftermath of the revolution, in the weeks after the revolution, Dzerzhinsky, the head of the Cheka, admitted to 849 executions, but the real number was probably closer to 8,000 or 9,000. And I remember thinking, I just had this thought yesterday. I'm looking forward to the next episode, and a section of that's going to be, episode 4 is called The Bloodbath Begins, and one of the subsections is called Iron Felix. And I'm looking at the number of people that they confirmed were shot in the days and weeks immediately after the revolution. And I swear to God, this is what I thought. And the official number was 849. And I thought to myself, geez, that's only 849? That's kind of puny, I really thought that's all? Just 849? Well, they didn't count probably most of them went uncounted. 849 murders admitted to, political murders for no other reason. And the scale of everything that came later was so enormous that I was almost embarrassed to write the number down because it was so small. 849 dead in Ohio would have been something we would have remembered. Robert Rivera asked the $6 million question, and that is, was Lenin as bloodthirsty as Stalin? I have given this a great deal of thought. The nice thing about getting to write your own show is I get to buy myself a little time. I did this on the Apollo 11 series and on all of them. And at the end of the last episode, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes to close the case. Lenin, in my opinion, was a worse person than Stalin. There's no question that Stalin killed more people. So on that scale, yes, he's the monster, right? Yes, he killed millions of people. But everything that Stalin did had been put in place by Lenin. All of it. Not just the mechanisms, not just the secret police, not just the state, not just the bureaucracy. Lenin was the guy who was saying offhandedly things like, all right, tell you what, cross the border, go over into Finland, find 200 people, shoot them, and that'll let them know. Just like that. Just like that, right? And that's actually really well said. Marusha got that exactly right. I might actually use that, actually. She said Stalin was the monster, but Lenin was Dr. Frankenstein. That's exactly right. Lenin, yeah, Eric Blake has got it too. He says the difference was that Stalin was competent. Yes. One of the people, I've read 9 or 10,000 page books to get ready for this thing. And in one of them, I cannot remember which, somebody said Hitler did his worst. I remember who it was. It was Martin Amis' book on Stalin. And he said that Hitler did his worst. And that was 3 years. He had 3 years really of doing his worst. Stalin took 35, 40 years. He said Stalin was the scariest thing you could imagine. He was a psychopath with patience. Yeah. And that's how I'm portraying him, too. By the way, I'm not using the name Stalin. I'm not until halfway through the 4th episode, calling him what everybody else called him at the time, which was Koba. So, yes, Stalin was a monster. And he became more monstrous over time. And his wife committed suicide in 32 or 33, and after that he was just never the same. But prior to that, look, he's murdering people, right? But he's just doing what Lenin had set up. We haven't gotten into the Great Terror or any of that stuff yet, none of the purges, none of the show trials. Lenin had a show trial. But Lenin set it all up. And prior to his wife's suicide, there was a humanity to Stalin, like a garrulousness, like a gregariousness to him that I never saw in Lenin. He wasn't just reading text, although Stalin was an actual IQ genius. He was a genius. But Stalin would have these enormous lawn parties in Sochi, down on the Black Sea where my wife came from, where she was in Moscow before that, and then Sochi before that, but born in Siberia. But you get the idea. So he's down there and he's throwing all these parties for other Bolsheviks, but there are kids are running around and Stalin's playing with them and he's throwing, little pieces of orange peels at them. And it's like there's like a certain kind of humanity there that I never ever saw in Lenin. Lenin was a very emotional guy. He was very close to his wife. He liked to go on hikes, but he did not like being around people at all. And there was never a moment in my look into Lenin's life where I felt like he was somebody I wanted to be around. But there were moments, and I'm not afraid to admit it, there were a couple years, one of the Russian woman who was writing at the time called these years the vegetarian years. But there was a time there where he actually looked like he was kind of fun. And that's before the big murdering started. I saw something here. Somebody had asked, here it is. Marusha said, do you think future generations will have propaganda films about the January 6th clown show? Not if I have anything to do with it. I was talking about that today on one of the right angles, just to get it out of our system. They were talking about My iPad just just came on, started playing. Well, that's fun. Um, I just said, here's the funny thing about the January 6th insurrection, right? It's being staged by the half of the country that says we need guns, and the half of the country that says we need guns say we need guns to protect us from our government. And I find it an unusual variation on the idea of insurrection that the people who were armed didn't have any guns with them when they went to take over the government. I find that to be really remarkably significant piece of information, right? Does that come up at all? You're all a bunch of gun loving MAGA, super MAGA Republican lunatics, and you're walking through the Capitol and none of you are armed? That seems like we could have done a better job if we'd wanted an actual insurrection. I think we could have done a much better job. So, yeah, you want to call it whatever you want to call it. We know why you're calling it that. We know why you do all of this stuff. We know. The question is, what can we do about it? Anyway, I don't think. Look, the communists, he renamed the Bolsheviks the Communist Party shortly after the revolution. The communists succeeded because they were able to control all of the information. I many times talked to my wife about how much excitement there was when they would get a chance on New Year's Eve, where in the final days of the Soviet Union, where they would ease up enough so that at maybe 2 o'clock in the morning they might run Once Upon a Time in America. And it was a real privilege and a genuine pleasure of mine to be able to take Natasha to an event where she got to meet James Woods, who was basically one of the only American stars she'd ever known or seen. And despite the fact that social media is a gigantic amplifier, it does also mean no matter how much, look, we're having this conversation, right? 250 people on YouTube, which is a really good number. It gets bigger all the time, especially for Stratosphere Studio. We got 47 on Twitch, 300 people. And this message is getting out, and it'll get out wider than this. And Joe Rogan gets out to more people than any network TV show in existence. And Jordan Peterson and Ben and all the guys at Daily Wire. I mean, and Elon Musk, buying Twitter. It's like they can't control all of it. And so this you can't stop the signal. Right? That's that line from Serenity or Firefly, I forget which. Yeah, you can't stop the signal. Signal will get out. Anyway, Equibo says, according to the January 6th hearing, Trump knew they were armed and some Proud Boys were armed. Okay, but I saw I'm not trying to be contrary with you, Quibo, but and you may be playing devil's advocate. I'm sure you are. But the point of it is, I saw a bunch of people milling around, and none of them had weapons in their hands, and that's what I would use to do an actual insurrection. So the whole thing's just invented. Obviously, everybody knows. So anyway, that's that. All right. So hey, look at that. That took an hour and a fun hour. Let's dive into the questiones, shall we? I know I post them on Facebook. I know it seems like, you know what? I'll do Facebook first tonight because I just feel compelled to do members first. And I never get through all of them, but at least virtually all of the Stratosphere launches, including the one in 2 nights, I'll do from BillWilder.com. So we'll work out of the Facebook page today just to keep you guessing, just to build up just enough hope, right? Just enough hope to keep you going for another year or two. Just enough. I'll give you just enough for the city. I was really happy to find out that the number one song in the country in I think it was June of 1970 was the Long and Winding Road. That was a nice cosmic coincidence. All right, here we go. And thank you, by the way. I hope nobody was waiting too long last night. I put up a little stream thing saying we're going to have to move it to Tuesday because I had to get these things out. And I was here last night till midnight and was here this morning at 6. But got them out, and they're good, and I feel real good about it. So let's see what we got here. Let's refresh this baby. Pretty exciting, huh? This Real TV. By the way, I heard Jordan Peterson talking about this, and as usual, he's right on the ball. Let me tee those up. Let me tee that up. Go from most relevant to all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I can get through those. Okay. So Jordan Peterson basically was talking about YouTube, and he said that it's really unprecedented in a lot of ways. The first way, it's permanent, and he said this is the first time in history that the spoken word has been recorded forever. That alone is fascinating. But he certainly got what I've gotten, and something I need to keep remembering. Certainly something I'm going to employ when I do the "Don't Be an Idiot" series, and that is that YouTube isn't television, and he said that 4 or 5 times. He's absolutely right. YouTube is not television. I had thought, not just thought, when YouTube started, when I got into YouTube in 2008, we put in a lot of production values. We had opening graphics, we had credit roll, we had all this stuff, right? Because we were TV people and we were now on this internet TV platform. So that's what we did. And over the course of 12, 14 years or something, YouTube content creators started to emerge who weren't from the entertainment business like I was. And they didn't give a hot damn about opening graphics or montages or lower thirds or credit rolls. And they especially didn't care about the kind of thing that I did for a living prior to starting at PJTV, which is cutting a conversation from an hour down to 23 minutes without you knowing about it. No jump cuts, reversals, close-ups, that kind of thing. That's a real skill. And now it's worthless. And what Peterson pointed out, what I believe for a long time, is that YouTube leaves the mistakes in, and that's what gives them authenticity. People trust it because it's imperfect. And if that's the case, then the Stratosphere Lounge is without question the most trusted show on the entire internets. But I find myself not only agreeing with them, I find myself having been programmed by YouTube in a good way this time. Because now, whenever I see news anchors, I just almost want to laugh. It's like, can we please just stop talking so that you start a sentence and we finish it? Tonight in Miami, a special rainstorm has come in and washed away most of the beach. Residents say that it's the worst rain they've seen since Tuesday. That kind of nonsense, right? I don't want to see it. Now it's like when they've got something, you'll see something like, oh, footage here on ABC 9, I don't want to see them talk about it. Show me the footage. I can make up my own mind. And that is something I need to work on. Is jump cuts. Jump cuts are anathema to me when I started. Right? That's a sign that you made a mistake. If somebody can see an edit, oh, there's a jump there. That's you really screwed up. But yeah. So anyway, I thought that whole thing about YouTube was absolutely right, and another thing I hadn't realized, and this is a heartbreaker, really, much more than the graphics thing, is that it never occurred to me that most people would be listening to me rather than watching me. You can only imagine how devastating that would be to me. But really, it's like watching a broadcast of Rush Limbaugh. You get a little, I guess, but really, you don't lose anything if you're just listening to the voice. So there's that as well, and on and on and on. Richard Burton, who I had thought had been long departed this vale of tears, in YouTube comment stream says, I believe the American Girl doll book is called Body Image, suggested kids talk to the doctor about puberty blockers. And I've been watching a lot of Odin's Men and a lot of, is it JT or JC? He's a phenomenon. He's a former Marine rather, who comments on YouTube videos. And he's good. And he puts out 3 a day, at least 3, sometimes 4 a day. I'm like, oh, look, there's something he released something 5 hours ago. And then I refresh the page. It's like 22 minutes. Here's another one. Bam. It's nice when other people, it's not like they do the heavy lifting, but it's nice when you can be fed something to knock out of the park in terms of these insane YouTube videos. But the reason I brought this up is because when I will get to the questions. I'll get all of them tonight. But what's going on now with this thing is just, thank you, Mark, is just one of the things that I had not realized about the trans movement at all, you'd think it'd be the first thing that came to mind. I don't know if it's occurred to you guys. Put it in the comment section down below. That's what people who know what they're doing do. Um, what he retired Marine, yeah. What a bunch of people have said and kind of made me realize I don't think anybody actually came out and said it is that one of the benefits for the people that are pushing this is that the whole trans movement is that any anybody who undergoes it, whether they have the surgery or not, becomes sterile. Right? They're sterile. They cannot have children. And when you look at these collections of these YouTube teachers, they're all 23 years old with nose rings and purple hair, and they're talking to their first graders about how she's actually a man and she went out with an actual person who used to be a woman and is now a man, and she wants this, validation from these first graders. And I realize, and they refer to them, all of these teachers, all of these groomers doing the indoctrination, they all refer to it the same way. They say, our kids, they're our kids, they're our kids. We're providing a safe space for our kids. I talk to our kids, our kids, our kids, our kids. They want the parents completely out of there. And they want them out of there because the parents will put some sense into their heads. But when you hear them talk about their kids and what they say to their kids, you realize how exactly possessive they are. They really do think it's their kids. And again, it didn't hit me until recently, but it's like the reason that these people think that these first graders are their kids is because they're not going to have any kids. Never, right? Never. Exceptions that we've discussed before aside, from a theoretical point of view, trans people and gay people do not reproduce themselves. And the fact that all of these people, whether they've had the top surgery, bottom surgery, they are sterile. And what I'm seeing across the culture with this, what's the name? Dylan. This was the trans person who was at the White House, who was having his 222nd day of being a girl, that kind of thing. He's on Dylan a lot, old JT, and what this thing is doing is it's openly stated is they are trying to normalize this stuff. So Dylan is a trans woman. He's born a man, and he's he's like the most famous trans woman in the world, and now he's talking to the president in the Oval Office, and he's got all kinds of endorsement deals from like makeup companies and all the rest of it. And I keep wondering what is the end game for these people, because what they're doing constantly, you see it not just with the trans movement, you see it with the whole fat phobia movement. They are trying to. They're doing something even worse than trying to normalize this stuff. What these people are doing on TikTok mostly, what the progressive left is doing, is they are trying to talk you into being sexually attracted to them, even if they're fat, 600 pounds fat. That's not their problem. That's your problem. You're transphobic. They're trying to convince you that you should be, if you're a straight male, you should be perfectly okay dating a trans woman, a woman who used to be a man, may still be a man, essentially biologically is a man. We're told constantly that if we're not willing to date a woman who used to be a man, who may or may not have had the surgery on top of everything else, then there's something wrong with us. We're wrong. That there's just something really horrible about us. You're transphobic, and it's like what they're doing. And they're normalizing this, and he mentioned Dylan because he was talking about normalizing the bulge. So there he is, not much of a bulge really, but there's Dylan who's still got the lower equipment, and he's dressed in some bathing suit, and he's dressed up and made up like a girl, and he says we got to get out there and show that women can have bulges in their bikini bottoms as well. And aside from the fact that I feel like I should be up on top of the Hollywood sign with a long flowing white beard and robes and a staff and just clean the whole thing with fire. That's what I want to do. but they're trying to normalize all of this stuff by exposing it to us constantly. And and one of the terms that's becoming real popular now is neurodivergent. Yeah, it's just George really got it right. It's just sin, right? I mean, it, what certainly when you are advocating it for children, it goes from being a personal choice to sin. And when you are trying to make confused teenagers who every day become more and more confused because they have no human contacts, they have no human connections, they don't have human friends, they have friends through their cell phone, they have followers, they don't have friends, they don't have anybody to talk to. So sometimes they'll talk to TikTok, and sometimes they'll just go off and cancel themselves somewhere. And these people are getting more and more emotionally fragile and insecure. And people like Dylan and the rest of this movement are preying upon them, and that's just not right. And they're trying to eliminate the ultimate goal is they're trying to eliminate the entire idea of truth, right? That they are trying to lawyer their way through this whole thing. That's what they're doing. They're just determined to, what's the word I'm looking for? To define themselves into normalcy. That's it, right? That's what they're trying to do. But what's the end game for these people? I mean, really, what is the actual end game? They can talk all they want to. They can make whatever accusations they want to. They're not going to turn straight men gay or straight women into lesbians, and they're certainly not going to turn straight men into guys that are looking forward to settling down and starting a family with a person who used to be a man and now is a woman. That's just not going to happen. So what is the end game for these poor people? And I say poor people because, while many of them are extraordinarily obnoxious, nevertheless, they have no end game. They are going through these life-changing modifications that are irreversible, and they are not hoping, they are counting on the fact that they will be able to talk you into what they want you to do. So if you've got a guy who wants to be a woman and he goes through the whole transition thing, he's doing that because he wants to have the now she has always dreamed of being the wife in a relationship, wants a husband, right? That's not gay, that's slightly different. But gay men and gay women exist, and they're fine, and they've got their own communities, and they're fine. And many times they're very happy. It's certainly about as happy as heterosexual couples seem to be, but they've at least they've got an end game, right? If you're two gay men, you settle down and you live your life together. Okay, it's not my business. I don't care. But these people are never going to get that. That's never ever going to happen to them. Ever. They are never going to get what they want, what they think they want. They are never going to become women who will then be loved and cherished and married to straight men. It's not going to happen. And somebody ought to be telling them this, because whether they have all of this life-altering surgery or not, that's not going to change. It's not. And you're not going to talk guys into it. It's not something you talk somebody into or out of. So, this is the only time I ever see Jordan Peterson. Well, twice I've ever seen Jordan Peterson not only lose his temper but really just start crying. Was when he starts talking about this. He gets all the way angry, which is good to see. Eric Blake says, kudos to Dave Rubin for calling out how homophobic this whole trans movement has become. Yes, that's true too. A lot of gay people, gay men and lesbian women, are saying this is offensive. But the real people, the people who really should be, and who are genuinely should be outraged by this, are biological birthing people who have periods, that kind of thing. They used to be called women, but that's before the society became neurodivergent. Neurologically divergent is something that virtually everybody has now. All of Gen Z has got to have some form of being neurologically divergent. They call it neurologically divergent. You and I would refer to it as batshit crazy. And that's what they are. They are batshit crazy. And they are trying to talk you into thinking that it's not. And I'm getting a little tired and JT says this a lot. Getting a little tired of this. I'm perfectly willing, because I'm a nice guy. It's no skin off my nose to call my uncle Bobby his. If he wants me to call him his, my Aunt Betty. I don't care. Fine. But when they start insisting not only that you go along with this, but you believe it, that you are going to just defy reality the way that they do, it's no, no. You have gone too far. And wow, Lutheran Carnivore, who we talked to earlier, said, I think maybe the high suicide rate has to do with the 67% complication rate of the transgender surgeries. There's that. Those surgeries are horrific, but also, I genuinely believe, in fact, I don't believe it, I know it. I know that these people think that when they have the hormones and the surgery, they will in fact become what they want to be. It's magical thinking. They believe it. If I only have, I want to be a woman, and I'm a man, uh, or in my favorite expression of all, when I say when they were born a man, what I meant to say was they were assigned male at birth. I'll get back to that in a minute. What is all the ends for here, Richard? Um, all right, so you know, a lot of it is designed to make you realize that there's no point in fighting these people. That the world's gone crazy, and your job is just to be grateful that you got to live in a sane country for a while and just ride it out and watch it burn. That's what a lot of this is about in terms of the uh, top level stuff. But what does one say or do about this? Well, the first thing we do is we talk to each other and make sure that we don't just lose our freaking minds and become batshit crazy ourselves. That's the first thing. And yeah, let me just get to this assigned at birth thing. When you hear these people talking now, they'll do tech talks about um, they'll basically say, well, the truth of the matter is that some children are assigned male at birth, some children are assigned female at birth, and sometimes the assignment doesn't go right. Like it's an administrative error. Like somebody made a mistake on a form. Uh, you know, I guess the surgeons or the person delivering the baby, the obstetrician, basically says, I don't know, maybe we should have a parlay about this. I'm going to go with male on this one. What do you guys think? Well, yeah, probably. Yeah, let's just, what the hell, we'll just put down male. Um, I've looked deep into the baby's eyes, and I didn't check the other end. Um, yeah, P70, P727 says you can regret it all you like, but the word irreversible has a fixed meaning. It is irreversible. Puberty blockers are irreversible. Your body is supposed to go through puberty at a certain biological age, and if you delay that, it is going to screw you up forever. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we are starting to have been in this madness long enough so that there are starting to be people who are coming out and saying, this is the worst thing that has ever happened to me, and I'm angry that at 16 I was allowed to cut body parts off because I was batshit crazy, like every other teenager is batshit crazy. Um, and Jacob Castro says, I thought pedophilia would be a polarizing issue, yet here we are. Yeah, we're not talking about pedophiles though, Jacob. We're talking about minor attracted individuals. Is that the term I heard recently? Minor attracted individuals. We got two super chats here. One from Sacred Order of Knightly Valor. This is Tragic Evolution. The epistemologically unfit are removing themselves from the gene pool. That's actually an interesting observation. And then Monk in Training with a super chat says, I think being fine with saying it but not believing it is a sign that they're winning. You might be right about that. Um, are you talking about like reference to my Uncle Bob? Maybe you actually may be right about that. Maybe this whole thing only happens because of well, like everything else, everything that they accomplish by finding out what we're decent about, and we're not racist. We don't like being called racist. So if you call us a racist, we'll shut up. We don't want to be considered, exclusionary. We believe it's not some kind of calling. It's not like it's because it's part of the Boy Scouts, but we believe you should live your own life and be free to live your own life. And if you're a consenting adult, it's none of my business. So they use that to get you to agree that you should be a nice guy to call your Uncle Bob Aunt Betty. And I was on that platform until 20 seconds ago. But as he points out, that may be, in fact, almost certainly is, what allows this whole thing to go off the rails, right? Um, yeah, that's probably exactly right. That's something really to think about. If you if you give them that, this is the problem with the left, right? They talk about huge injustices and they want a tiny little thing to repair it, and they end up taking huge things to fix something that's barely there. Yeah. Um, Now, I felt a whole lot better about all of this prior to the midterms, but now you really have to ask yourself. Well, everybody's asking themselves whether the elections really were elections, but certainly it seems like the beatings will continue until morale improves, and that's why we got to just stick together. Uh, I just don't see any way to stop this thing. I think you just ride it out. Titanic's going to the bottom, and you can either go to the bottom with it, or you can get into the lifeboats or uh, club Rose over the head, knock her into the water, and get on that giant floating piece of furniture that was big enough for her and Jack and probably three or four other guys. But he didn't want to cramp her, you know, don't want to make her uncomfortable by squeezing too close together. Greg Mid Tennessee says for a super chat, straw will never be gold, no matter how hard you believe. Correct. And Marusha says, while I hate the term neurodivergent, for its pretension, it points to a core truth about human minds aren't a monolith. Case in point, ADHD is a hunter's mind in a farmer's society, so of course they'd be maladjusted. Completely agree, and want to just be clear about this. Neurodivergent is a way to describe mental pathologies that is scientifically accurate and probably has less sting in it than batshit crazy. But unfortunately, neurodivergent is one of those words, one of those terms that are like shoehorn terms, right? If you, who can disagree with the fact that people are neurodivergent? Of course, they're neurodivergent. Just about everybody's got some kind of neurodivergence. I'm neurodivergent. I'm prone to depression. I'm divergent from the norm on that case. So, okay. But I don't go around insisting everybody refer to me that way. And I certainly don't wear it as a badge of pride. You know, it's not something I'm like waving a flag about. And although God knows I could get my own flag. And when you watch these people, especially, when you watch them, you realize, you watch these TikTok videos in Gen Zers, and you realize that these poor, poor kids, they have never been allowed to compete in anything. Right? Never. They have been given the participation trophy. They're not allowed to excel. Anybody who does something better than anybody else is, the Marxists are coming out and telling them, this isn't fair. You need to share, blah, 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 blah. They haven't allowed to do anything except for be victims and protest. So when you see one of these kids on TikTok light up with enthusiasm because they have essentially invented a new gender for themselves. I forget the last one I heard was a triagamous or something like that. And the guy was carefully explaining to me, it was a guy obviously, it was a guy who was carefully explaining that his particular gender was a gender where you feel both male and female and trans at the same time. So he gets his own little symbol, his own little flag, and look at him. Boy, he's made it. He's made it in the world now. He's going to get a lot of followers. He invented his own gender, and he'll say he's neurodivergent, but in truth, the fact matter is he's just batshit crazy. And by the way, if we want to put an end to this, and I do, I think that's the only way to do it, right? Is to just say, no, we're not going there. You're not neurodivergent. You're batshit crazy, right? And we're perfectly willing to be batshit crazy on your own time in your own house. But when you're trying to make our kids batshit crazy, and when you are trying to recruit people into irreversible surgical procedures that will either scar them for what may be left of their life in order for you to have personal validation about your own batshit craziness, then this is time to start saying this is batshit crazy, and we're not taking it anymore. It's like they're trying to normalize all this stuff. So now they're saying, well, you're just a cis male. I'm not a cis male. I'm a male. Right? You don't have to qualify me by saying cis male. I'm a male. That's one of the two conditions. The fact that you're saying trans means you're going from one condition to another. You are admitting the truth of the binary by the way you define it. Right? I'm non-binary. Yes, you are. I mean, no, you're not. You're admitting that you had to leave one of these two conditions to make a third condition that you invented. This is why we get the assigned at birth, right? Oh, yeah, well, the doctor made a mistake, or these doctors, boy, if they weren't assigning sex at birth, I guess we'd all be trans. And that's what it's all meant to be. And when you look at, I just want to say to these people, so I just have two questions for you. So if somebody has children in the deepest part of Africa, and there are no doctors there to assign birth, to assign a gender at birth, how do they figure all this stuff out? The second question is, I'm pretty sure that animals don't have doctors to assign them a gender at birth, and they seem to be able to divide into these two binaries pretty much universally. Define our way out of sanity, define our way out of normalcy, all the rest of it. And I don't want to hear about the party of science ever again. All right, back to the questiones. Or into the questiones, I suppose I should say. All right, here we go. I'm going to do 5 of these, and then I'm going to upload this stuff, convert it, then upload it, then I'm going home. All right, so here we go. From Facebook this time. Joe Pomeroy. Good evening, Bill. Good evening, Joe Pomeroy. I'll redo a question from a week or two ago that I think will flow with whatever is currently trending. We're always up and down with the current thing here. Do you think creating a Stratosphere Studios Twitter would be a good idea? I think if culture has to be won, then going on Twitter as a purely entertainment entity could have great benefits. Imagine if a preview or model got seen by Elon, what type of exposure that would bring. Anyways, love your work and thank you for all that you do, the latest of which is giving a voice to the victims of oppression. Well, thank you for that. That's very, very kind of you. I've said this quite a few times, and I'm not happy about it, but we don't get to control what reality does to us. We only get to control how we react to it. It is extraordinarily bad luck or planning on my part. I'll be willing to own that too, certainly. That the instant that I finally finished this animation project, I had to drop the animation thing completely, all of it, including Stratosphere Studios, all of it had to go just immediately. That was painful, but it was also necessary. And so I am looking forward to getting the last of these scripts out the door so I can at least ride that horse part-time. And as far as being seen by Elon goes, I actually did think about doing that commercial about the Chinese moon landing, and instead of making it a pitch for the Free Frontier for crowd-funded space exploration, which we talked about in 2011 or 12 or something, I think, I would just basically have them be, they're met by these astronauts. The Chinese step down the ladder and they plant the flag, and all these Chinese people are leaning forward and crying, and do a reverse shot. You pan off to the left, and there's a Tesla rover, and the guys are wearing these super cool 21st century suits, and in the background there's all these starships packed, and they've got a casino there and all the rest of it, and the guys say, come on, welcome, we got a room for you, you're going to love it here. If I made that, and I can make that, that's actually pretty simple compared to the stuff I did already. I feel the chance of Elon Musk getting a look at that is pretty near 100%. It'd be 30 seconds long, right? So one of many things I have stacked up in the pattern waiting for their landing clearance. So thanks for that, Joe. And thanks again for the kind words. Jacob Belchak. Hail, Bill. What makes good art? I'm glad you asked. These are the kind of questions I really like to deal with. Jeff Childers says, what scares me is who will take over Twitter when Elon dies. It's a super chat from Jeff. Jeff, I became concerned about Elon and Arkenside, but I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to move on. But in any event, oh wait a minute, hang on. This is interesting. Jen Anna on YouTube says, I'm a peds nurse, a pediatric nurse, and we do a needs assessment on admission. Now we have the question to ask parents, What was the assigned gender at birth? I just can't cope with this crap and I'll just skip it. Yeah, you and me and the rest of the world. I think this is going to hit a tipping point where everybody's just going to look at everybody else and say, "Why?" It's going to be one of those emperor's new clothes moments where everybody's looking around and goes, "You remember back when we were all kind of batshit crazy for, you know, years back then? Remember that?" I hope so. In any event, if that doesn't happen in the larger culture, then the answer, which we should be working on anyway, is contraction, right? You can't turn you cannot stop the Titanic from sinking by hanging on to the flag at the stern. You just can't. It's going to the bottom. Let it go. Go someplace else. Do something else. Take another plan. It's too big. It's too massive. It's too woke. It's too slow. It's too fossilized. It's too stupid. Save everyone you can, but for God's sake, get them away from the suction when that thing goes down. That's where I'm headed rapidly. I've been there for a while, actually. Okay, I have a couple from someone so-called Eric Blake or something like that. Hail Vectron, Citizen Whittle, thank you, by Hail Vectron. And by Vectron's Golden Claw, may our cultural endeavors prove most popular, influential, and of course profitable. I couldn't have said it better myself, nor could Vectron. Okay, and I just opened it up and we see, here we got 3 paragraphs. So everybody get comfortable, put your feet up, and go get a sandwich. Now, in a previous episode, Marusha noted her concern about commentators on our side saying woke when it isn't the case. You seem to feel it wasn't much of an issue, but as you may recall, I showed you all back how a significant number of online conservatives lashed out at Daily Wire for having, by and large, female protagonists so far. See, I'm inclined to see Marusha's point. Many folks, including certain commentators, have gotten so overwhelmed by the culture war they essentially have a kind of PTSD and paranoia seeing woke where it just doesn't exist. Now, you've often spoken about the value of an essential bait and switch in stories with political point. The protagonist starts off with the left POV, but comes to realize that they're wrong. The problem is how many conservatives will see the bait part, fail to wait for the switch, and then go woke. I thought you were on our side. What are your thoughts on how to deal with this? I'll discuss other aspects of this issue more in future generations, future questions. Generations was a Freudian slip there. Soon to be posted in the membership forum as I join. Okay, so I can actually combine this with the question that I just ignominiously skipped over by accident. And that question was, what is art? So the argument is you make something that has blue values in it, represented in it, in order to bring in the people that need to see it, primarily blue audience, and then the red audience doesn't sit till the end credits and says, what happened? You turned traitor on us. I never envisioned it as a bait and switch, and I never really envisioned it as as hiding something. When I was talking about, getting Gen Z and stuff, I was thinking almost exclusively about visual appeal. I think, look, I haven't seen a frame of it, but I've seen enough clips from Yellowstone to know that, as always, there is a tremendous, unbelievably powerful yearning for strong male characters. And Kevin Costner is just knocking that thing out of the park. And that kind of thing is the kind of thing I want to do, but I want to do it with laser beams and and spaceships and robots and stuff. So if it's so heavy-handed that people say, "Oh, that's the progressive stuff," and then, "Oh, that's the conservative stuff," then I failed. Basically, you're trying to tell real stories about people who are dealing with real issues. That's the thing I like most about the colonies, and especially about the homesteading subplot. They don't have the luxury of luxury ideas. They have to deal with reality, because if they don't, then they're all going to die, and that is a long way away from where we are now. Okay, so let me get to the question about what is art, because we talked about that today, strangely enough, on our right angles. I just got a text a few minutes ago from our editor wondering if I was going to do the thumbnails today, and I thought, oh yeah, I forgot about that. I always forget about that, so I'll knock those out after I get done. That'll take me another 15 minutes, honey. So there you go. So we were talking about the movies. The Steve show today, I think, on Right Angle, And we were talking about all the things that were wrong with them and what's happening at the box office. Spent a lot of time on Avatar and all the rest of that stuff. Uh, and I retold a story that I'm pretty sure I've told on the Stratosphere Lounge at least once or twice, but it is a Stratosphere Studio kind of story. Uh, so, as I mentioned earlier, before I started at PJTV, I was an editor in Hollywood for 10 years. Did a lot of documentaries for uh, History Channel, and Discovery used to be about science back in the day and all the rest of that stuff. But I spent the last 5 or 6 years working exclusively on a talk show called Sunday Morning Shootout with Peter Bart and Peter Guber, and both of them have a long. Even when I did this would be 2003 or four. Even then, they had a long track record. Hold that thought, Sacred Order of Knightly Valor. If I don't get to you, I want to answer that question. Um, so this question came up a number of times on the show. What makes a great movie? Why is a movie great? Now, Peter Bart, who's older than dirt, and I love the man. I love Peter Guber too. I don't know why. I just liked them. They were kind to me. It was the middle of the Iraq War, and they knew I was a big old conservative, and they just were nothing but nice and respectful to me. So I love those two guys. Um, but Bart said Peter Bart was instrumental in the creation of The Godfather. He was one of the key players. I want to say at Paramount, who made it happen. He was genuinely one of two or three people that had to do an awful lot of work in order for that production to get off the ground. And Bart and Gooper agreed about this all the time, but Bart was talking about The Godfather specifically. If not the best movie ever made, it's certainly in the top three. And Bart said that his experience was, to which Gooper immediately agreed, he said his experience was that the best movies came from the most difficult sets. That that any set that was running smoothly could produce a good movie, but a great movie almost exclusively was a terribly difficult set to work on. It was just constant haggling and constant criticism and all the rest of it. And I said on the Right Angle show, I'll just repeat it now. I said, the reason that people get into argument and screaming matches and maybe start throwing things or threatening to quit or actually walk off the set on something like The Godfather is because they cared enough. That's why. Actor has this opinion about this character, the director disagrees, and they both care enough to be willing to go the distance on it, right? They're gonna walk off the movie over it. You don't get conflict unless you have people who care enough about their opinions to argue in the first place. No one's arguing on these modern sets. It's just done by computer printout. We're going to shoot the shot here, and we're going to shoot 5 different endings, and we're going to test screen all of them, and we'll just assemble it based on statistics on who got the plurality of the best response. So yeah, and yeah, where'd he go? Andrew DeLay on YouTube said proof of this is Apocalypse Now. Probably after The Island of Dr. Moreau, maybe the worst movie ever to work on. Uh, Both of which had Marlon Brando in it and was a big factor to why both of them were so terrible to work on. But that's the essence of what Bart said, was that the essence of what made those great movies was because of the give and play and the dynamic. He didn't describe it this way. I don't think he did anyway, but I'll describe it this way. It's like the reason that the sun is able to produce so much power is because the nuclear fusion of hydrogen into helium wants to blow this thing apart and will blow it apart, except that there's so much mass, there's so much gravity that the sun's gravity wants to crush it into a nothing, into a singularity. And where that explosive energy power outbound meets the total gravity inbound, that's where the star stabilizes for the length of the star if it's a main sequence star. And that's essentially what I think happens on a great movie. These contrary forces find themselves in a balance, and that balance is the sweet spot where even if you disagree about this one particular thing, you know that you're doing good work now. You know it. I've seen movies. Natasha and I remember we saw the Tom Cruise remake of The Mummy, which just I'd like to say was one of the worst films I've ever seen, but frankly, it wasn't good enough to be a bad film. I have no memory of it at all, practically. But we were talking about it afterwards, and I remember saying, no, he just, well, you want to talk about phoning in a part, right? I mean, he doesn't care. The villain was some, you know, some some 23-year-old chick, is, just come on, really? Oh, her skin does all right. Um, but but no. Um, so that it's that conflict that makes good art. And I'm going to zip through this again, even though it was practically a staple of the Stratosphere Lounge. For those of you who may be watching on YouTube, not heard this before, I'll just tell it to you real quick. Um, I'll tell it to you, but I would tell it to you, but I just a second forgot what the hell it was. Um, well, that's so annoying. Talk about conflict. Oh, come on, come on. I hate it when this happens. All right. It'll come back. And when it comes back, I'll jump on it. Meanwhile, there it is. A super chat from Sacred Order of Knightly Valor says, have you seen Star Trek Continues? Truly canon-worthy sequels to the best original series episodes. Finishes the 5-year mission in 11 issues. I have seen it, Knightly Valor, and thank you for the super chat. Star Trek Continues is a fan film, and it is an order of magnitude better than any of the other fan films out there. And I'm going to include Axanar in that. I really am. And the thing that's so delightful, the thing I like the most about watching Star Trek Continues, is that Vic Mignogna was a huge fan, and a huge fan of William Shatner, and was apparently a Shatner impersonator. And he got his build is exactly correct, and he got the hair exactly correct. He got the walk exactly correct. And there are moments, I swear to God, there are moments in Star Trek Continues when you'll see him turn, and I'll think that is William frickin' Shatner. Just instantly you make that connection. So that is fantastic. He's off the charts great in that. He makes the whole series. His supporting cast is pretty spotty. The Spock guy doesn't really look like Spock, but he's a good actor. The guy who plays McCoy on that is just awful. For Star Trek Continues, they got Jim Doohan's son to play Scotty, and he does a great job with that. He looks like and sounds like Mr. Scott because Mr. Scott's his dad. But a lot of the supporting players are just, especially the McCoy, he's just unbearable. He just really wouldn't. Now, Robert Rivera asks a question that's fun to answer. How do fans create the sets for these films? Well, as I sit here, there are three. There are at least 2 good Enterprise bridge sets. In fact, Enterprise interior sets. One of them is good, and the one that Vic Mignogna did is unbelievable. So one's real good, but the other one's perfect. Perfect. And the lighting is perfect. And little things, but they're so important. When Mignogna did Star Trek Continues, he shot the thing on high def video, but the finished product has a 4:3 ratio. It's got the old TV box much squarer look to it, because that's what the original Star Trek had, was 4:3 instead of 16:9 or something like that. So so it's just perfect, and you can tell that episode, that show is all of them are labors of love, right? All of them. But this goes back to the question of what is good art, right? What makes good art? What makes good art is you really have to care. You have to love it. You have to love it enough to make it happen. Dan says, I wonder if Bill knows about what happened to Vic Mignogna, the lawsuits and whatnot. I read a bit about it, and I personally just scratched the surface. I didn't see anything that made me go, oh my God, but that could be the case. So it's just love. It's just love, and it's there in every frame. Now, come on. Oh, the episodes. They're a little. I'll get to that Star Trek thing I did in a minute. The episodes are a little uneven, but the one episode, somebody will put the name up here in the hive mind in a second. There is one episode of Star Trek Continues where a transporter error leaves Kirk stranded on. They're trying to rescue another Constitution class ship, and the transporter does its thing of splitting people up, and it makes a copy of Kirk who stays on this vessel, and the other copy of Kirk beams back to the Enterprise. And since the Enterprise crew sees that Kirk's aboard, they just go sailing off, and they leave this other Kirk there for 60 years, 40, 50 years, something like that. He's all alone. He has nobody to talk to but the computer. And that episode is one of the five best original. It's one of the five best Star Trek episodes of all time ever. It is the most beautifully written, beautifully acted masterpiece. It's magnificent. It's just absolutely magnificent. And I remember watching this and thought, my God, this is good. This is just so good. It's so moving. It's so sad. It's so Star Trek, you know. I don't know the details of what happened, but I'm not saying I know. I've just said I don't know, so I don't know. But I know what it's like to be slandered and libeled, and that's not a fun feeling at all. That's the worst feeling in the world, to be accused of something you didn't do. That is by far the worst feeling in the world. So, that episode, Raging Mirror. Thank you, Sad Wings. I think it's Raging Mirror. Did I get it wrong? I don't know. Anyway, I guess that's not it. In any event, it was fantastic. Cody Fett says, Star Trek Continues was a fantastic set of films. What happened to Vic was awful. He was accused of being accused and lost almost everything over it. They will not win because we will not let them win, period. I can, I can, I don't think many people can say this, but truthfully, I know what he went through. I don't think, I certainly didn't go through it on the scale he went through, but I know what it's like to be accused of that and see your name in your local paper, which happens to be the LA Times, as famous scientific racist Bill Whittle, that kind of thing. That is not a good feeling at all. And my heart goes out to the guy, and would have regardless of what happened here. I don't. I was talking at the beginning of the show about how D.W. Griffith invented the tools of modern filmmaking. He did. He deserves a lot of credit for it. He was an awful guy. He was a racist, and the first real movie was a propaganda piece in favor of the KKK. I'm not in favor of that, but you can't take away what he accomplished from who he was. That's what the left tries to do all the time. You got to look at some peccadillo or some major thing that this person did, and by using that, the guy had a flaw, therefore all his work gets chucked out the window. That's how you destroy the foundation of any society. You just find some human element in one of these marble gods that support your civilization. And once you find that flaw, you point that flaw out, and then you add the point that, well, since he was flawed, therefore everything that he did is flawed too. It's not true. Thank you, Traeger. Han shot first. That's simple. Eric Blake says, hey, Bill, could you see Vic as Frank Luke? We talked about the Frank Luke series. No, Frank Luke was a tall, thin, wiry guy with a real sharp face. Anyway, that set is still available, and I would like to take advantage of it someday. I mean, look, right there, see? Now, that, I might point out, by the way, is not, I admit that the mannequin is in worse shape than he was when I put him up there, but that is not yellow cloth. That is gold velour. It is the exact replicate, dark mirror. It's exactly the command line tunics from the first episode, and so are the plants with the stitched in blousing. So, which brings me to the thing that I did. I keep threatening to put all these things up online, and I need to do it. I've got them. I have a little breathing room now that I didn't have for the last 2 weeks, but whether immediately or shortly after immediately, I will get to this. Put up, greatest hits. So, my favorite afterburner is nothing like my best afterburner, but it's certainly my favorite afterburner firewall. is called the Dowd conundrum. And I did not use a practical set for that. I didn't know where there was one. It was 2009, I want to say. Um, and and so here's what I did. I found a bridge model, 3D model. This is 2009 or 10, so quite a while ago in terms of computer graphics. It's 3D Studio bridge model, and it was absolutely terrific. I mean, it was excellent. So I asked the guy who made the model, could I get this and could I use it? Would you mind? He said, yeah, okay. Um, and uh, and what I had to do to make that thing come alive, because it was 3D model. All of the screen displays were perfect, perfect. This guy put so much effort into this, but understandably enough, they weren't animated. And that has to happen for it to be the bridge. So what I had to do was I had to go look at these texture maps of the squares changing and all the rest of this stuff. And then I had to go into Photoshop and wink some of them on and off and stuff, make little loops of that, put those loops in place of where the stills used to be. And sure enough, now I've got the twinkling lights in the back of the Enterprise, and that visual motion sells the set. Um, so somebody said, Justin Whitsett said, did anybody tell Bill that Henry Cavill is making a 40K series? No, they did not. Let's save that for next week. That's wonderful news. Cavill rather is suddenly becoming like one of the great heroes of the age. So here's how we did that show. Uh, when I was doing Afterburner at PJTV, they'd bought some pretty fancy equipment, and that equipment had motorized cameras, and then the equipment generated the virtual set that I was in on the fly, so they could move the camera and pan the camera, and the virtual set would move perfectly. And I'm looking forward at the monitor and the teleprompter. I can't see behind me, and I mentioned it before. I think I finally went into the control room and saw some raw footage, and there I am standing against a green screen, and I did nearly 100 of those things. It's like I never saw it at a green screen. Always saw myself in the virtual set. So there are a couple tricks to making this thing work, and the most important one to put people into a CG environment. Now, a lot of that's automatic these days, but back when I was a boy, uh, we had to do it manually. And in order to get the angle on the camera, the live action camera, to match the angle that you choose in the 3D set, that's the key to everything. It's very, very difficult until suddenly it was a piece of cake. And the way it was a piece of cake was when we decided we were going to do that at PJTV. I've almost got his name. The guy who was in the head tech guy at PJTV, said because I draped some green screen fabric over a stool, and sat on that, and it was like, no, that's not going to work. You see all the folds and stuff. It wasn't good. What the hell are we going to do about this? Tabor. He said, if you can give me a platform, I mean, if you can give me a plan, a blueprint, I'll just build the captain's chair out of plywood. Really? He said, yeah, I'll just build it. I'll do it in a couple hours. So I get on the internet and I search for blueprint of Enterprise, a blueprint of Captain Kirk's chair. And on the first hit, there it is from Paramount Studios. Perfect. Three isogonal, whatever, views of the thing. All the dimensions there, fantastic. I hand it over to him. He brings in the thing the next day, and it is precisely, exactly the size of Kirk's chair, except it's chroma key green. And then everything after that was easy because I shot the live action stuff first. I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted the angles to be. Right? I know I want a close up here. I know I want a reversal here. I want one shot where I turn around like that. So I knew what I wanted. We shot those against the green, and then I took those into I guess it was probably After Effects. And since the chair was visible as green, and since the chair had the exact same dimensions as Kirk's chair in the 3D model, all I had to do was make the chair match, which was easy because they're nice straight lines. Once I got the chair one on top of each other, everything else worked perfectly. And so I did this thing about Obama because Maureen Dowd had called him Captain Kirk or called him Mr. Spock. She called, and it was just so stupid. So I basically went after that. But the really reason I liked the show was because I got to talk about Star Trek. I got to talk about how it's America, basically. Really got to do it. Dear Bill, are you lifting weights and why not? Thank you, Monk. You look, Bill. Hey, Bill, have you been working out? No, well, I didn't think so. So I got to really get into what Star Trek really was, and I had the hair right, and I had the perfect uniform, I had the boots. It looked decent. It didn't look great, but it was decent. In fact, it was actually pretty good, all things considered. And I just love it. And every time I see it, I was 13 years younger. So I was 17. And every time I see it, it's like, I didn't realize it at the time, because you can't, because you're in a green box. But now looking at it, I feel like on some level I've been on the bridge of the Enterprise. It was great. So, okay, let's get back to our questions here. Here's Eric Blake again. Let me see if it's another. Oh no, it's another novel. I'm not going to do it, buddy. I'm sorry. It's just a novel like the last one. You get one novel per show. Maybe you could rephrase it or something like that. And then Jonathan Earl Hubble says Daily Wire needs exceptional content from Bill because I posted here on the Facebook thing that I was done with the immediate deadline of the 3 scripts. I still got 5 to do, but the fact that I got the 3 done in the time I did meant we're really moving now. So I can't wait to get in here and do that tomorrow morning. So let's go to BillWhittle.com and take at least 1 or 2 of the probably 30 or something that are there and see if we can do that. Wow, the thumbnail for me on the last Stratosphere Lounge looks like I'm about to give somebody a proctology exam. All right, let's see. Oh, I keep forgetting I have to log in. That's a requirement. And then we go to members, and then we go to member forum, and then we go to my favorite part, which is Stratosphere Lounge questions and more. And Stratopop questions for the Monday stream, which is the Tuesday stream. 9 posts. We're not going to get through all of them. I will see what I can do here. I'll do what I can in order as they come. Kyle Brandt says, "Hello, Bill. I was curious. I might have talked about this before, but I'll talk about it again. Hello, Bill. I was curious if you will be considering possibly putting a tabletop system together for the Colonies universe once it's fleshed out enough to have one. I've played tabletop for a great many years and love it, but most of the good systems nowadays are going woke. They expect you to build your own Donald Trump to fight with your diverse and inclusive party of diversity and inclusiveness. You can't rely on any of the lore in them anymore." I am virtually positive that I thought at first you were talking about a board game, but I think we're talking, when you say tabletop game, I'm sure we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, Traveler, that kind of thing. By the way, I started off the show by mentioning I just finished episode 3 called Ramshackle Revolution. And I was originally going to call it Ramshackle Empire, which is a Traveler term, and bonus points if you know what that refers to. I obviously hadn't thought about it, Kyle, but why not, right? I mean, it's extremely easy to do. You have a lore book that's already written by the time a series is there. You've got a universe for people to play in. You probably could market miniatures, sets, miniatures of the ships at least for space combat kind of thing. So yeah, and if we are, and I'm virtually positive we're talking about an RPG role playing game. You don't have to reinvent that wheel, right? I mean that has been done a lot. And frankly, you could just pick and choose the little segments of the of whatever system you particularly like, throw them all together, and then put some, drape some tinsel on it, and off you go. So I'd love to do it. Real quick, we have a super chat here from Lapco92. It says, a few bucks of source potassium nitrate in case that Gorn in the background moves. I occasionally keep my eye on it, LOL. Thank you very much. There he is. He's waiting for me, but don't worry, gang. For those of you concerned about my safety, what you cannot see out of frame just below here is I'm holding a gigantic bamboo cannon, which I have bound with strands of cable that I made out of palm fronds, and I've managed to find potassium and saltpeter. I'm sorry, I've managed to find sulfur and saltpeter and some charcoal, and a bunch of diamonds to use as bullets. So I'm planning to give him a reception that he's not going to forget. It's my favorite moment in television. It truthfully is. That's why I've got him there. I also have Kirk against this wall behind my deluxe thing that used to be a gem and now is a clothes hanger, which obviously shows. I've got Kirk on the wall. I'll bring him out, and he's looking over his shoulder as he's putting the little hole in there in the breech to fire this thing off. Here he comes. He's coming with a knife. The knife is pretty simple. That's going to do it. And that moment when he fires the bamboo cannon at the Gorn, and the Gorn is a ridiculous looking alien. I don't care. When he fires that thing, it's like, ladies and gentlemen, you have just seen in a nutshell what makes Western civilization. That's the key to Western civilization, right there. The thunderstick. That's it, right? The trouble and the brain power to not only know the science behind it, but to have a vision of what it looks like before you build it. You know you're going to go out and you need certain things. I've talked about this before. The author of Bridge over the River Kwai, which I think was originally called Bridge upon the River Kwai, but anyway, a French author named Pierre something or other wrote the book that the famous movie was based on, Bridge on the River Kwai. And he said something in that story that I never forgot. It was one of the first things I ever talked about ever in this business. He said that he really got to the heart of what makes Western civilization unique, and he said that I guess this was based on a true story. He basically said, "Hey, we're rating our channel. Hi, everybody." Basically, Pierre Boulez, something like that. Anyway, in Bridge on the River Kwai, it's a story of British prisoners of war who were captured by the Japanese. The Japanese were utterly brutal and really, really, really nasty. Really, really murderously nasty to prisoners of war. Matter of fact, my mom was one of the first stewardesses for BOAC, which became British Airways. And she remembers telling me a story about how, this be in the 57, 58, somewhere around there. She was boarding the plane with the crew, the captain, and a huge crew back in those days. Captain, co-pilot, navigator, radio operator, engineer, all that stuff. No, it's not Pierre Boulez. It's whoever it is. Anyway, so my mom told me about this time where they were pretty much getting ready to go. This old, piston-powered 4-engine Stratocruiser. And just when they're getting ready to close the doors, the captain comes back and he sees that there's a pair of Japanese businessmen like in row 4 or something like that. And he basically says, "I'm getting off this plane. I'm not flying them. I'm not flying them anywhere. You fire me if you want to." But no. I don't remember whether he had actually been a prisoner of war or had friends who'd been killed in the prisoner of war camp. Might have been him. But he simply said, "I am not going to fly them. Period. Do what you want." Anyway, that's how bad they were. I just love airplane stories. There's a true story about a British Airways pilot who landed at, well, let's just say it was Frankfurt, right? And he's in a British Airways 747. He lands at Frankfurt Airport in Germany. This is in 1973 or 76, somewhere around there. And he runs a little long on the rollout on the landing, and he takes a taxiway, and he's stopped for a minute, and he's looking at his charts. He's trying to figure out the taxiway, and the controller's being real pissy. The German controller's like, the call sign for British Air is Swiftbird, is it Speedbird? Speedbird 262 heavy. where's your ramp? And the guy says, I'm looking for gate C-17. And the guy says, do you not see it on your map? He says, I'm working on it. He's got the British accent, right? And then the guy says, the controller at Frankfurt says, what is the matter with you, sir? Have you never been to Frankfurt before? And the British captain says, I have, only once during the war, but I didn't stay. And I thought that was just fabulous. Just fantastic. All right, so back to the point of all this hoo-ha. Which, once again, has absolutely flown into my head with what we're talking about. This is very annoying. Bridge on the River Kwai, right? So what he said was that, and this is true, that when the Japanese needed to build a bridge, what they would do is they would take a work crew out into the jungle, and then they'd start lashing together just a bunch of bamboo, right? They just lash it together, and they take some more bamboo, and they stuck some things up here and lash this together and that together, and they'd kind of make something out, and they knew that it would, hold a little bit of weight, so the bridge would last for maybe a month or two, and then it would collapse, and the train would go with it. Then they'd go out and do the same thing again, right? They just lash together some other stuff. But he said that the thing about Westerners, specifically the British in this case, was he said that they build the bridge in their head before they ever built the bridge for real. And I thought, that's really interesting. He said that the British would send out individual teams, some guys who had experience with engineering and civic engineering, geology, or whatever. They'd start taking samples of the sand to see how much load it would bear, taking samples of the sand and drilling down cores to see how deep they had to put the pilings. They basically blueprinted the bridge. They all sat around and argued about it. They made a bunch of corrections on the blueprints. They hadn't done a single thing on the bridge, nothing on the real bridge, but in their minds, they were perfecting that bridge. And when they it was Pierre Buell. So the idea was that the key to Western success was not that you would just go out into the world and just kind of ad lib it or just ad hoc throw something together, which is what most of the third world looks like. Everything that's built is just thrown together, and anything that's from the West, it's just got Band-Aids on it if it's broken. So it requires a great deal of upfront work, but the payoff is it lasts forever. Andrew DeLay says, hey, it's the same with software. You know what you're going to code before you write a line. That's certainly how it should be. You might want to send that message over to Chris Roberts at Star Citizen, because that's a project that's writing as it goes, and they're just getting further behind every day. I'm not going there now. So the reason I think that this was the greatest moment in television history is because that's all you need to know about Western society. You got a big, strong creature. Kirk cannot beat him using physical strength. He's simply not strong enough. His skin, the Gorn captain's skin is too tough. He's too strong, and he's just made a flint knife. That's all he needs. Probably could do it with his bare hands, but he's got that. That's all. So now Kirk is in a situation where he is facing the natural world, and he's just one of these hairless apes who doesn't have claws or particularly strong teeth or anything like that. He's got to use his head. And he, thank you very much for that, Rudzilla. And he simply sits there and says, what can I do to stop this thing? I can't, I could build a bow and arrow. That's not going to penetrate his skin. A knife's not going to penetrate his skin. I tried that, basically. Hit him over the head with a boulder. That didn't do any good. I even gave him the double punch. Nothing. And the flying kick as well. Nothing. So he's just running, and he realized, I'm going to have to be running forever. He's probably got more endurance than I do. So it's just a question of me finally falling asleep, I guess. And then he says, what would I need to kill this thing? I'd need a phaser. Well, I'm not going to be able to make a phaser. What about a gun? One of those old-fashioned guns. Yeah, I could. Yeah. Well, so what would I need for that? And Kirk, being an educated man, even though this technology is hundreds and hundreds of years old, says, okay, let me just think about that. Gunpowder is charcoal, saltpeter, sulfur. I think that's it. And I don't know what the proportion is, but it doesn't have to be particularly efficient. It just has to go boom. What am I going to put it in? I need a barrel. I've got here's a big piece of bamboo because the aliens that set up this encounter with the Gorn left raw materials there so they could figure out a way to kill each other. I need something out of the bamboo. That's about the right width. That's good. I could pack it full of gunpowder, but man, I don't know. Bamboo's not really. very strong. I'm really worried that the thing's just going to explode in my hands. I got to have something to reinforce the barrel. So he starts basically, threading out rope, and he's wrapping this thing around there to help contain the pressure from the ignition, so he doesn't kill himself when this thing goes off. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. Meanwhile, the Gorn's, I'll make it easy on you, Kirk. And he's just running and picking up the stuff he needs. And Spock alone, who's watching the whole thing from the Enterprise, Spock is the only one who's smart enough to know how smart Kirk is. And what's he doing, Spock? And it's like, okay, well, Doctor, I think he knows what he needs, something along those lines, right? So he does. So he makes the bamboo cannon, and the bamboo cannon nearly kills the Gorn, and Kirk has a chance to finish him off, and he doesn't. We win, we pass. That's what science fiction used to be. The humans were the good guys, and the humans were the good guys. And I just got back from seeing Avatar 2 nights ago. Stunningly beautiful, so beautiful, made Natasha cry a couple times. It's just gorgeous. But it is the most simplistic and lazy, on the nose, over the head bashing of Western civilization that I've ever seen. And it was so offensive to me. I'll tell you what really pissed me off. I talked about this on Right Angle 2. What really pissed me off the most about Avatar 2, aside from the laziness, the bad guy from the first movie is magically resurrected by his plot armor, and he's now an Avatar. So you've still got the same bad guy, the same, Marine Corps guy. You get the same, our job is to kill everything that moves, and you've still got, the whole thing about for money, unobtainium, which was formerly the most valuable element in the universe. I guess we just replaced that with zinc or something, because it's not even mentioned. Now, the prize material in the universe is not unobtainium. We got a movie about the water. We can't very well go mining under the water. So now the most powerful, most precious source of money in the universe is in the brains of these space whales. And the whales, by the way, are not only sentient and can communicate, but they also do advanced mathematics in their heads, and they create symphonies and music and all the rest of it. So there's that. Plus, you've got a mother with a calf. You're just all set up, right? Who's going to be on the side of the whalers when you've got a fully thinking, lovable giant whale with its baby whale? Who's going to be on the side of the guy with the explosive harpoon tip? Well, I was. And the only reason I was because I knew what was being done to me and everybody else in the audience, and I just wasn't going to go along with it, Just wasn't. So we're the bad guys. And this isn't a spoiler, really. It's beautiful. It's beautiful in the way that original Avatar was beautiful. This is enough beyond that, so that it hits you again, like, oh my God, I can't believe it. But the one thing that really, really, really pissed me off the most, and the thing that made me lean over to my wife and said, "All right, I'm on the human sides." What? Yeah, I'm rooting for the humans. In the original Avatar, the soldiers, the death-dealing, kind of stupid, perennially violent soldiers, were mercenaries. They were basically nondescript. They were just hired guns, right? But in this one, the same bad guy is signing off of a log, and he says, "All right, Semper Fi." And I said, "That's it. I'm out. I'm done. I'm done. F you. I'm done. I'll watch the rest of the pretty pictures, but you can just kiss my ass, James Cameron. F you. Semper Fi, really? Really? You're going to do that? Okay. All right." So the rest of the movie, I'm rooting for the humans. Even when it came to the whales, I'm rooting for the humans, because it was such a cheap shot, and was well, I almost said it was an unnecessary shot, but I guess you got to make your points, right? So Cameron made my favorite movie of all time, Aliens, my favorite movie ever, by far. And now he's just I think I talked about him on the Right Angle today. He's like a pudding, He's just soft, mushy, self-indulgent, narcissistic, vain, condescending horror. But horror. And and he is so he goes to such great pains to he really does. He goes to incredible effort. The only effort he puts into the script at all is the laziest script ever. But the effort that he puts into it, he says, how can I really, really make it sure that I'm talking about capitalism in America here? What do I have to do to make these humans not just unlikable, but utterly wretched? People, how do I get people to hate their own culture? That's what he's out to do. There's no question about it, right? So so he apparently, when we go back to Pandora for the second time, we've got spacecraft that are specially modified to land on the planet, and the modification is that they now have gigantic, you know, 700-foot flames that come out of this thing and basically light a couple of square miles on fire just by landing. Why do spaceships never land like that before? Because you never had to burn down forests before. But they do. Looks fantastic. But these humans are arriving, and it's dark shadows in the sky, and all of the authentic blue people are busy doing what uncivilized savage people do. That is, sit around, make beads, hug the family, and then eat something that neither had to be hunted or gathered. It's just there. That's what the primitive people that James Cameron idolizes do. This is a noble savage, right? Man in his natural state is kind and loving and good, and it's only civilization and capitalism that ruins him and turns him into this death-dealing, metal-loving war machine. Which led me to an interesting idea. By the way, just before they fire the harpoon at the whales that you've come to love, because you've just spent half an hour with one of them, you realize these whales are swell guys. Just before they fire the explosive harpoon into this whale, the captain of the whaling ship, because if you're going to go whaling, you got to at least go 4.5 light years away. That's de rigueur. Last thing he does before he pulls the trigger is, all right, let's make some money here. Let's kill everything and make some money. Yeah, that's exactly how we work. That's exactly how the Marines work. They do nothing but deal death. And there's another line that he's got, just in case you missed it, in case you missed the Semper Fi thing. He's got these aliens on this alien planet. It's 200-300 years in the future. He's got a bunch of like thatched huts and stuff, riverside, seaside people. And as he's leaving, he says to his other fellow Marines, he says, all right, torch the hooches. Torch the hooches. Really? That's interesting language that's 400 years old for you. Rather arcane reference, don't you think? Torch the hooches? Because the only time I ever heard torch the hooches was in stories made by left-wingers about Vietnam. That's when I heard torch the hooches. Just F off. I'm done. Just go away. Go away. And you know what? That's what people have done. They've gone away. We saw it after it had been open for 9 days, and we saw a 9 p.m. show on Christmas Day, and there were probably 15 people in an auditorium, in a theater that probably held 300 3D theater. So 16 people there. When you buy the reserved seats, that's what we do out here in Los Angeles, you're presented with a look-down view of the theater, and I looked at this and said, oh, God, it's sold out, man. It's sold out. It's too late. And I realized, no, those aren't full seats. Those are empty seats. They're empty. There's nobody there. Nobody's going to see it. It's bombing, and it has to make $2 billion to break even. So it's going to lose a lot of money. It won't be his money, though. It'll be China's money or BlackRock's money, somebody who is more than willing to pay a measly billion or two to get people to hate themselves even more. And that's exactly what it does. It's exactly what it does. It's exactly what it's designed to do. And I'm really glad that that nobody's going to see it. And the reason nobody's going to see it, I'm convinced of this. It is so visually stunning. There's no reason to not go see it. If there was ever a movie you want to see in a theater, it's Avatar. And if you can see it in 3D, my God, it's incredible. And I think the reason people are not going is because they know the plot is just garbage, hot garbage, and they know it's lecturing, and they simply don't. They're just not going to play. Not going to play along. So there's some justice for you. All right, so let me get to these super chats, and I believe I will fold this tent up and leave. We have a super chat from Rodzilla that says, Bill, you should be able to filter the chat for super chats so you can read them at your leisure. If you need help Ask your pals that stream a lot. I will do that. Thank you. Certainly need some kind of control over it. Um, Kobe42 with a super chat, €2, which is very much like real money. Uh, do you have any? I'm kidding. We're all friends. We're all Westerners here. We can kid each other. Right? Do you have any Star Citizen plans still? I do not. Uh, Lapco92 says for a super chat, wait a second, why am I sending you money if you've got spare diamonds lying around? LOL. I've only got cardboard picture printouts of diamonds. If I had the real diamonds, I wouldn't be talking to you losers, certainly. Um, Eric Blake says, I hate to tell you this, but the box office is doing very well. Well, it wasn't doing very well when I was there, and it doesn't look like it's on track to make a $2 billion, so disagree on that one if you want to. And then finally, Muru Shadok with another $20 super chat. Bill, you and Zoe often trash talk imagination when the left does it. Yet here you are making the case that imagination is a heroic strength that leads to all technological and scientific breakthroughs. Which is it? What's so hard about this to understand? Imagination, like a gun or a hammer, is value neutral. It's a process. The thing that matters is, what do you apply the imagination for? What are you going to use your imagination to do? If you're going to use your imagination to destroy people's faith in reality, then yeah, imagination's a terrible thing. If, on the other hand, you're going to use imagination to enlighten people, to teach people, to raise them up, there's no contradiction here. It's like saying, why are you in favor of cars because so many people die in auto accidents? Well, that's true. Yes, it's true. But that's not the point, right? The car doesn't care. The car is value neutral. So I don't see that one at all, but nevertheless, there you go. All right, so you know what? I think it's time for us to just go. Eric says it's projected to hit 1 billion on Tuesday. Okay, Eric, fair enough. It's been open for 2 weeks, and it is about to get to the halfway point. It's not going to make it. It's not going to even be close. If they didn't get 60 or 70% of that in the first 2 weeks, it's never going to happen. So it's just not going to happen. It's not. 955 million worldwide. Okay, it's been open for 2 weeks. Everybody who's going to go see it in a theater has gone to see it already. That's what's going to happen. Anyway, yeah, let's just go home. I think I'd love to go home, but I have work to do before I go home. But at least I can start on the work before I go home, but by starting now. So that'll do it, I think. All right, hey, guess what? The Stratosphere Studio, like all excellent, top-quality programming that's put out by BillWhittle.com, is manufactured with loving care and a high degree of precision. On behalf of the members at BillWhittle.com who make all of this possible, I thank them every single week, twice a week now, and I mean it every time. We are here because the lights are kept on by the members at BillWhittle.com. If you're watching this and you want to support us, you can go to BillWhittle.com and become a member. You can make a one-time donation at PayPal if you would like. We don't have commercials in this show, and if you're young and you don't remember network TV, you really don't know the sweet, sweet agony of having a show that you're leaning into interrupted every 7 minutes to give you 3 minutes of commercial. I've completely forgotten what that feels like, and it was just bloody miserable. We don't do that because we're not selling soap. We're selling hope. Oh, God. What? How freaking clever was that? My God, I can't hardly believe it. All right. Anyway, so thank you to the members. Thank you to those of you for watching, prospective members, past members, pseudo members, imaginary members, trans members, all of you. We're just members in waiting. We're glad to have all of you. And thanks for being here. Thanks for support. And as I carefully scroll up with it so that you couldn't see it, see, watch the editor. See, I'm looking right at the camera. See, I'm looking to see if I can find, see, barely see my eyes move. I'm really trying to see if I can hit this one.